I went to see a herbalist earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, so she says she can cure everything. So I asked her, can she cure obnoxiousness? She says it's mainly because of hormonal imbalances.
Why people become obnoxious?
Yeah, that's why people become obnoxious. So if we sort out your hormones, it could actually cure. Yeah, it's a modern herbalist, like any herbalist nonetheless.
Over the weekend, I was in Kisumu.
So you vanished to where?
I vanished to. I had a long
Migori.
I first of all went to Bungoma, then drove down to Kisumu. Then gari kasema Wendi Migori. So we ended up leaving Kisumu at 3, and most of the time was at the mechanic.
Yeah, cars have no respect for their owners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now that you mentioned the herbalists, I saw a sign of a herbalist.
Yes.
The Luos call them Professor Herbalist. They have to have a title.
But even the ones from Tanzania are professor.
They're called professors.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
I saw that. I've not seen. I mean, I move around. I see Dr. Kalonzo and Dr. Didi, the ones from.
Well, they all have PhDs. It's just that other one has tenure.
The professor has tenure.
He has tenure.
So what was the motivation? Why did you want to cure? What was the motivation behind finding out things with obnoxious behavior?
What part do you want to find out? How I ended up with the herbalist, or why I asked the particular question?
We have all the time. Where do you want to start?
Well, it's a young man I'm working with who wants to invest in the business of a herbalist. So it seems like they're about to start IPOing. Mganga kutoka Tanzania. He'll soon be able to buy shares.
Hii yako inakaa story ya Bunuasi, but keep going.
You see, your problem now is to divert issues. No, this is digression. All the lessons of Abunuasi are very legitimate. And if we could only follow them today, this country would be making strides in leaps and bounds. Yes. He teaches you about what we call sectional property ownership. He teaches you about the dangers of interest for the sake of interest. Yeah. He teaches you about having stupid dreams. You want a castle in the air? He shall build you one. But the question becomes, how will you get there? So chunga sana kupigana na Abunuasi. Abunuasi ni jamaa mwerevu. So, well, basically what it was is it's I didn't know it's what they call them. There's a term, and we actually train quite a number of them, and most of our institutions. It's actually alternative medicine. So using herbs and natural treatment methods. And I think our problem has been is that we took most of the herbalists' children and turned them into modern doctors instead of turning them into modern herbalists. Because we need more people who can give us treatments which are more in tune with us. Yeah. And I think one thing that shocked me one time, I think it's in China. I think in China only about 20% people are on modern medicine.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. So I think even the census for Kenya is about the same. We're only about 30-40% who go to modern doctors. And we do have institutions that are training those alternative herbalists. The problem is that the pharmaceutical and the medical board are obsessed with pushing us Western ideology. Instead of asking themselves, really, does it make sense for us to be spending billions importing synthesized drugs when you could get the same effective component by eating bananas? Yeah, don't know why your doctor can't just tell you, just go eat 5 bananas a day.
Do you think they don't because of the incentive they get from pharmaceutical companies?
Definitely. Yeah, if the herbalists can team up and start sending doctors on trips and conferences in Mombasa, the doctor will quickly start prescribing sukuma wiki, terere, managu, because some of our problems are just about how regular you are. And in simple, how regularly you're shitting. Just let's stop beating the bush. Unless you're releasing the waste from what you've eaten, it's going to poison you. And that's what's poisoning us.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be regular. You need to hit the loo for a long one twice a day, minimum. And it's interesting you went there, because I'll tell you, for the last 4 months, I have really been keeping records.
You've been very intentional.
Not only intentional. I basically bought a smart scale that has Bluetooth, connects to my phone. So every time I stand on my scale, it updates. So now I even know. So I basically take my weight when I wake up. I take my weight after breakfast. I take my weight after taking a dump. And then I take my my weight again later in the evening. And let me tell you, our problem of not appreciating data is because we don't even maintain any of ourselves. Now I know. I can tell you if I'm about to get a case of constipation, because my scale tells me what my fluid levels are and then my weight. Between the two, I can now detect what's going on.
I'm trying to look for the word. Isn't that too... There's a word that... I'm trying to remember. There's a word Sheldon Cooper in Big Bang Theory uses.
What, too much information?
Not too much information. You know how... So Sheldon... in the character, the character Sheldon Cooper, he is very, very particular. He knows even what all his relatives died of.
Yes.
He's so specific to the point that even for the woman he wants to marry, even the blood group, everything, it's very defined. Of course, the blood group, I know the benefits of that. But I mean, I find that to be very... There is a word. The fellow characters describe them.
You'll find it. But the key question is, why not? I still get medical insurance forms asking me how my relatives died. So really, I think Sheldon is just...
Even death by badger?
Yeah. Yeah.
Beat him to death?
All those really tell you something about your character and what you're likely to end up doing.
But then what happens to the spontaneity of life? The excitement that comes with the unpredictability that life has.
I think the last thing you want to be unpredictable is when you're taking a dump.
You don't want to get a dump when you're...
when you're halfway between toilets.
When you're away between Kericho and Nakuru.
Let's be serious. Spontaneity has its time. A spontaneous dump is called diarrhea. Not a good thing to experience.
Okay. So you've gotten us to how you got to talk to herbalists.
Okay.
Now, how did you get to trying to find a cure for obnoxiousness?
No, she sounded like she could cure anything.
Don't they all?
Yeah, so you have to give them something that's unique and different.
Okay.
Yeah, and that one was. And the fact that she was able to have a comeback tells me she's of above average intelligence.
So you did a test, you asked a question just to test another human being.
I thought you told me to be spontaneous. Can you be consistent?
Can you? It's the same thing. The last time when we were having the conversation, you were talking about, there's something you've alluded here that was connecting to the previous episode when we spoke about... this has disappeared. There's something when you're talking about the IPO, and I remembered the previous episode, I asked you about the doctors, taking doctors to Dubai and conferences and dinners.
Yes.
And in the previous conversation, I think you're smiling because you know where I'm going with this. When you spoke about judges,
Yes.
taking judges for trips to Dubai, you were very adamant and said that our friendship, the favors you do me, should or cannot influence my decision. But we're seeing the pharmaceuticals,
yes,
to be slightly different, and you agreeing with that? So are you going back to agreeing with my...
No, you're talking judges and doctors, eh?
Favors are favors.
No, those are not favors. Those are conferences. Call it a favor. Send me on a holiday. Don't tell me you're sending me on a conference.
So I'm going to... Let me put it differently. We've agreed that doctors prescribe Western medication,
yes,
because of the pharmaceutical companies taking them on trips.
Partly, yes.
Now you're trying to...
I have to position myself where I have an out.
If that is the case, if you take judges to trips and lunches and dinners to Mombasa,
yes,
if doctors can be able to influence the medication they prescribe, which is basically business, so what's different from...
The difference...
What makes the judge's case unique?
I think the difference here is the same pharmaceutical companies are the ones who developed most of the curriculum for our doctors. So really they were just going for refreshers to continue to do what they have been doing. I doubt that the fellows who gave judges a trip also took law students on a similar trip.
I would have used that one, but I'm going to hold it back.
Okay, so we leave only one person with the freedom to be spontaneous.
I think you're just there, Apple. You're just trying to go navigate. You're just trying to go around the bush instead of admitting to...
Dixon, if you've ever dated, you should know that one skill that every man must have
is going around the bush.
Yes. Being able to explain away
any
situation in which you find yourself. Yes.
But we just have some situations like they're clear. It's like you better be father, like let's just
at least make the attempt. I think she'll also appreciate the fact that you've gone out of your way. To try and justify. So which means you care. Which actually reminds me, somebody believed he was insulting me on social media earlier yesterday. Then I got back to him and I said, you wouldn't have been as caring. Or let me just rephrase that. If you weren't cared about me, you wouldn't have taken the time to think up an insult. That ended the discussion.
Last week, in our previous meetup, we spoke about being conscious.
Yes.
And something that I've really taken, thought about quite deeply. And while doing my thinking, I happened to come across this Western African gentleman was explaining this thing they call the pyramid of wealth.
Okay.
This is the reason I bring this up. It's because this is an area that you have an interest in, and you actually run lessons around it. In this pyramid of wealth, he was saying that at the bottom, it's financial instability. This is where you are unable to even meet your costs. And then the layer up, it's financial stability, whereby the income you get can be able to sustain you. Immediately above, he said, there's financial independence, whereby you have what you need, some savings here and there. This is now your middle income. And his argument was that the challenge with this, the moment you lose the source of income, give you 3 months, then you're back to stability and then all the way. And then right above independence was now what he called freedom, financial freedom.
Yes.
Whereby is you have this passive income. This is money coming in without you necessarily having to do anything that can meet your costs. So meaning even if you don't have an active income,
yes,
you can sustain the life you're living. I think then it had wealth. I can't remember fully all the steps. This hierarchy, it seems to be like a staircase that you have to climb. Well, okay.
I think it's more a hierarchy based on number of people. The majority of people are at the bottom of that pyramid. And more of it, the way he's explaining it, is that they're refusing to live within their means. It's that simple. Okay? They're living beyond their means, and therefore, they remain stuck at the bottom. The move slightly up is those people who have suddenly realized the problem isn't my income, the problem is my expenditure. I should stop trying to control my income and instead be more conscious about how I'm spending my money. So it's about the number of people. And it's very interesting because I did a talk on LinkedIn last week, or was it this week? Last week. I think it was last week, Friday. And there's one thing I always do when I'm called to do some of these things is I leave people with a takeaway or something I expect them to do, or what those of you who went to school, it was called homework. So I left, there were about 32 people on the call. So at the end of it, I shared a link to a landing page that allows you to calculate your net worth. Of the 32, actually 2 went, but they didn't even go of their own accord. One was the organizer, who I called, and I asked him, after the call, you all said it was very informative, but yet none of you has clicked the link. He says, no, I've clicked the link, but I found blah, 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 blah. So I went and I took a screenshot. I said, no, you've not looked at the link because there's nothing like what you're saying. Then the second person commented about the event on LinkedIn. So I responded to him and told him, I hope you have followed the link. And which tells you a lot. Many of us are quite comfortable where we are. And the most comfortable place is at the bottom of the pyramid. Because you can't fall. Anything above that has a possibility for you to fall. So many of us are very comfortable down there. We don't really want to move. And which is why, like you say, yes, the cash flow sessions, the financial literacy sessions I run, it's why I've decided running them once every 6 months is more than sufficient. Because the number of people out here who really want to change their financial situation is negligible. They all talk about it, but they don't want to do it.
Hold on. When you say the number of people who want to change it, but then the people who really or actually want to do it,
Who actually do it.
Yeah,
a want is a desire.
What makes it the case? I mean,
back again, the brain consumes most of your energy. So the less time you activate it, the less energy you burn. And changing a behavior is literally breaking up pathways in your brain that had been created, and then for a while have a fluid routing of messaging in your brain. It's painful. Many of us would rather not. Yeah. So we keep going with the default. It's easier. Just get on the train, sit back, and wait till it stops. Then get off.
Okay. So a lot of people would prefer. So you believe a lot of people are actually at the bottom of the pyramid, which is the instability, according to this pyramid that I've described.
Yes.
And you're saying that that is the case because people don't want to make changes in their lives.
The conscious decision.
The conscious decision of, let me manage my expenditure. When you say expenditure, you that is the only thing we have control over.
Yes.
Over income. Some people will argue and say you actually have control over income as well.
How? Side hustles.
Side hustles could be one of them.
Theft.
What do you mean by theft?
That's theft.
How's that theft?
That's theft. I don't know if I've told you this before. I got fired for having a side hustle from one of my jobs. And my employer told me, please note, we pay for 24 hours of your day. Of those 24 hours, we expect you to work for 8 hours. We expect you to relax and do other things for 8 hours. And then we expect you to be asleep for 8 hours. So any minute in the day that you do a side hustle, you are stealing from your employer. Then I took it, I didn't take it too well. But today, if you ask me, as an employer, I agree.
My employer listening to me do this podcast and make money out of it, might argue I'm stealing from them.
Possibly. Now, what we had is, as I worked for that lovely company, it was a leading consulting firm.
Yeah.
They allowed me 20% of my time, of my 8 hours. Not the other 16 hours. Of my 8 hours, I was allowed 20% for what they call practice development.
Okay.
If whatever else it is you're doing that will then add value to us as a business, then that is fine.
This is where I have a challenge with this concept. This 8-hour thing, right? You pay me for 8 hours. Arguably, you're saying you pay me for 24 hours.
Yes.
Which is quite new and radical. and
well, that was in 1992 when I was late fired. So the guys were thinking about it then. It's not that.
So
new.
It's now that's changed. That is in the world I've grown up.
There's a reason you're not working for one of those companies because they would have fired you. Nothing much has changed, and I think nothing much has changed. It's only that those organizations that feel they have a responsibility for you 24 hours are diminishing and diminishing very fast. And that's why now you're talking about me telling you, fine, if you don't want to give me 24 hours of your time, then let's go back to what we used to call piecework or per hour billing. Yeah. So I only pay you for what you do for me. Anything else, I'm not going to pay you to come and sit here and look into the sky. No.
Here's my thought around that. So I have 24 hours. Right?
Yes.
Arguably can be broken down into either phases of 6 hours. Those are 4 parts.
Okay.
Or like you did, 8 hours,
yes.
3 parts. And 8 hours are fully for my employer. Right?
Okay.
So that is my income. Basically, that's what keeps me living.
Yes.
Because of the income. And then I have these 8 hours, which is, like you said, relaxing. I can choose to relax, spend time with family. I can choose to travel.
Yes.
I can choose to learn a new skill which is completely unrelated with my job, like photography.
Yes.
Right? What's wrong with that? And in the meantime, as I learn my photography, I might as well take pictures and make money out of it. So I'm not interfering with my job. So I'm just trying to take out this passion that I have and monetize it. I mean, Elon Musk runs how many companies?
He owns. He owns. He's not CEO. He owns.
He's CEO.
Very
CEO
different.
Of Tesla.
He's a managing director. He's a director who manages. Very different. With a CEO has no stake in the business, which is very interesting. That only one of the shareholders of KQ actually holds shares.
One
of the directors of KQ.
So all of them are employed.
All of the rest don't even have shares. They have no faith in the company for which they are mandated to run.
That's quite interesting.
Yes.
I thought we do have this legal requirement of if you are on a board.
Nope. Another street law.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It was shocking. Actually, I looked at it. It's only the general who
the general manager?
No, the general, the military guy.
Oh, the military guy.
Yeah.
Okay, who's in the board.
Who's on the board and also has declared that he has shares.
But how do you and I don't want us to forget the question of the side hustle. But how do you sit in a board of a company that you don't have interest in?
That is very common in this part of the world. There's
okay.
There's an association called the Kenya Private School Association that mainly deals with schools that are in the 844, the local curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, they had a chair who used to run a school that was not running the local curriculum. And I kept asking them, makes no sense. They said, no, we are running a school. I said, no, you run that association to fight with the CS. This person has no reason to engage with the CS. The exams are done externally. Their teachers are certified externally. Their students are going to get an external certification. It's common. We have been having people sitting in positions where they have no stake. I've told you, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked that people have been refusing to ask. And like we say, hopefully, through this, we shall get people to start asking some of those questions. Yeah.
Living intentionally.
Yes. So back to your question.
Yeah.
What I think the whole take is, and I think what people don't get is, again, I'll digress slightly. Disney built a town to house their workers. So how much of their workers' time did Disney have?
The whole time, including weekends.
Okay. BAT here, Unilever, all of them had estates where they housed their workers, which meant they picked you up with a bus in the morning, took you to the factory, they dropped you back in the estate, which they owned, where you went to live, where you stayed. So they literally owned you 24 hours. And I don't think it's as negative, because what I'm looking at is, shouldn't you have faith in your employer that you can improve your skill to give back to them, as opposed to wanting to increase your skill to go and do something totally unrelated? Because then, if you have no loyalty to me as your employer, then who do you have loyalty to?
I'll not describe it like you've done. It's not a case of loyalty. It's the realization that as a human being, you have different interests. You today, you can be an engineer, and tomorrow your interest could change, because life happens, and as you grow up, as you discover yourself as time goes by. You started off in IT. No. You started off in accounting.
Yes.
Right now you're right now you're in account. You're now in IT. You move from IT to data centers to startup.
Actually, now I'm in education.
Education. So, and how do you develop this? It's by those 8 hours. You reading a book, you catching up a podcast, you attending a webinar. That's completely unrelated. And I think that is how we achieve what you call intelligence.
Then let's do this. My take. Okay. Let's take your position. Then go up to your employer and say, I can only afford to give you 4 hours of my time a day. And that's it. The rest of my time, I shall allocate it elsewhere. Then now you end up with a gig work. And then you end up with somebody telling us that an Uber driver is an employee. But Uber was supposed to be gig work. Was supposed to be, as you're driving to work, you carry one person. And when you're leaving work to go home, you carry someone else. Then somebody turned it into... You see, again, it becomes a very slippery slope. Because note, I'm covering you for medical. I'm covering you for a retirement. I'm covering you for all your expenses. So really, at the end of the day, there's no time that I do not have your back covered.
I get and understand that. And I think if we go down that route, then we'll end up with the slippery slope.
Yes.
That you're talking about. And then the other thing we need to look at, their nuances. Like, we can't just... When Uber was starting off, it was a gig economy.
Yes.
It was supposed to be that. It's when you're going to work, instead of you just fueling the taking up the entire cost of the fuel.
Yes.
Just pick a few other guys and go with them. The same way with the Matogoro Matato. Okay? So that was basically the concept.
Yes.
But then you realize that if you come to certain economies, or there are people within a certain economy who will then take that up because they don't have work to go to. Okay? So then this Uber becomes, so if I did this in the morning, I can do this again at 10, I can do this again at 12, and I'll be able to meet my costs.
I believe that's called being self-employed.
So if I'm doing that and I have my full-time job, assuming this is now someone who's employed.
No, you don't have a full-time job if you can do that.
No. This is someone who's employed. In the morning, they picked up someone, went with them to the office.
Yes.
Actually, I'll give you a good example. One time I was picked from home coming towards town, Westlands. And as I was coming, of course, I was having a chat with the driver. And I was like, no, this is not what I do, actually. Now I'm going to the office. So what we've just done has given me fuel for right now and in the evening. So in the evening, I also pick someone else, go with them at home, and that will buy me flour and bread.
Yes.
Okay? So whatever you're doing is unrelated
to what your employer
is doing. So clearly affecting the income side. I get the concept that you're trying to bring up, but I also want to believe that someone might argue that it is actually harder to reduce expenses than increase your income. You can increase your income by updating your skills, like you've said, so that you can rise up the ranks in your organization. Okay?
Yes.
You can take up photography classes.
Yes.
You come stand in Nairobi streets, take pictures, and make money out of it. So you're basically affecting income side. I don't want us to rely on the aspect, unless you want to argue that out. I think we can control both.
I've no objection to that. You can control your income. But tell me, if you're, and that's what I'm saying, if you're formally employed, really the likely thing you can control is, one, your expenses.
Okay.
2, how much you save. 3, how much you invest.
How much you save, how much you spend,
how much you invest. Yes. And to me, if you invest into what will provide passive return, then I don't see any problem with that. You doing your 24-hour job, because what you've done is you've gotten your money to work for you. But here, where you're getting yourself to work to do that additional income, then I think it's a disservice to your permanent employer. Yeah. And that's why you'll hear people saying, oh, I've not been promoted and yet I work hard. I doubt it. Chances are you work hard partly for your employer and partly for yourself.
That's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to get the rationale behind why that is.
It's because I think it's a question about what the Americans are now calling a working wage. Let's stop discussing a minimum wage. Let's start discussing a living wage, A living wage. Whatever I pay you should be able to allow you to live at a certain status, in a certain position in life.
Coach, even if you were to take this, like you said, if you were to take this active income from the employer and then put it into a passive investment.
Yes.
Ultimately, you'll still spend time learning that. If you want to get into the stock market, that is a whole new, that is an entire craft you have to master. If you want to do forex trading, that is an entire craft you have to master. If you want to get into real estate, that's an entire craft you have to master. And it's not related to your job. So I need us to agree, first of all, regardless of if you want to go start a business, a job, whatever it is.
Yes.
Ultimately, you'll take some time off the 8 hours.
It's very interesting that you bring up the topic of the stock market. The book I'm currently reading is about the history of capital. And in 1792, see, I haven't remember the date, is when the first exchange was set up.
What's the date again?
1792. Okay. And what was its purpose? Exactly what you're saying. But what they were saying was, and most of them were actually very interesting, were municipal bonds. So municipal bonds and infrastructure bonds were what were being issued to the working class to be able to develop infrastructure, and could say a lot about why American infrastructure was built very well, because the people who had invested in the infrastructure were the users of that infrastructure. Somewhere along the road, we lost it, and we thought that the development of infrastructure was a government responsibility through taxation. But as of 1792, the development of infrastructure was investment by the citizens on the infrastructure. So they had a skin in the game. Okay? So when you look at that, and they clearly explain it. So when they moved from just infrastructure bonds, it then moved, I think, sometime in 18 something, is when they had the first stock exchange for the corporate. And what was the justification? The justification was that somebody with no skill in a certain industry can invest in that industry and benefit from its profit. So what that tells you is, if you want to get into forex trading, you don't have to become the forex trader, because then you're a part-time forex trader trying to trade against a full-time forex trader. And that's why 90% of the people, so-called forex traders walking the street, rise to a certain level, then they crash, because they are doing it as part-time forex traders. Because you're fighting against a guy sitting at Goldman Sachs, somebody sitting at BlackRock, somebody sitting at Barclays, somebody sitting at KCB, somebody sitting at Equity, whose job 24 hours a day is to think about forex trading. Now, we don't live an African life, we live a Western life. Now, in the 1800s, somebody thought about having an exchange that allowed those who are employed to invest their money for return. Mm-hmm. Within 2 years of the stock market forming in the US, there were 300 companies. The Nairobi Securities Exchange has existed since the 40s, and we have less than 100 listed companies. Why? Because we all want a side hustle. We don't want to grow a main hustle, then allow others to put their money into that main hustle and make a profit. I think I've exonerated myself from whatever hole I'd gotten myself into.
Okay, let's not turn this into but then I mean, like, yeah, for me the parting is, if you have passions, pursue them. As an example, the job I do full time started off by exploring my passions. so those ones also,
exceptions? No.
It's not an issue of exceptions and norms.
It very much is.
Anyone where we at least know, except for Warren Buffett, at one point they were exploring their passions.
But his was the same throughout. And I know your journey.
Okay.
It's been consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So your employers all benefited from whatever new skill you are acquiring. True or false?
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Yeah. So you actually do not qualify to make the statement about a side hustle. But you are actually improving your skills the best way you knew to benefit
myself.
Your employer. No, your employer.
Good. So let's get back to this pyramid, because it's something that I think we need to be able to really explore. Because I think to achieve the middle class level you were talking about in the previous episode, you require a level of stability, even in your life.
Yes.
To go around make noise about an education system, there has to be. And this pyramid was actually quite interesting because it really follows the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
For you to get to self-actualization, you need to sort out your physiological need. You need to sort out, as you go up, your sense of belonging to the point where by now you can become the person who you really want to be or who you're supposed to be. Self-actualization. So this pyramid was very
Can I interject?
Okay.
Does the way you live define whether you have achieved self-actualization?
No.
Okay.
Because you can live anywhere, but if those needs are met, your physical needs, your psychological needs, you feel safe, then you can achieve your...
So you're actually confirming my position.
Of reducing your expenditure?
Yes. You don't have to reduce it. You see, part of it is not, you don't have to reduce it. Just keep your expenses fixed while your income grows.
Yeah. Yeah, that I agree.
Yeah.
That I agree. And then now the question is, you have other factors that will affect your expenditure.
Ability to do that.
No, your expenses.
They don't need to. And I think I'm sure you've heard me narrate the story of my friend who worked for a bank. And she got promoted 2-3 times. And she kept the same car. Then her boss walks up to her one day and asks her, why hasn't she upgraded her vehicle? So she asked, is that part of my job description? Are you going to evaluate me at the end of the year based on whether I upgrade my car or not? He said no. Then she told him, then that's none of your business. You can hold your costs low or fixed while your income increases. And it's nobody's business but your own. If you make that the business of your neighbor, of your friends, of society, then you shall remain at the bottom of the pyramid, always trying to catch up with others' expenses, and instead of monitoring your expenses based on your income.
I think tumalizie show up. Anyway, so that is a very good and a very powerful comment, because I feel like that becomes the challenge.
Yes.
You change your job, you change your lifestyle and all that. Then the competition just keeps on. Now you no longer want to go to Mombasa, you want to go to Maldives for your holidays, because all that society, that is what society expects of a manager, right? So going back to the intentional living, the conscious living that you're talking about.
Yes.
For someone who's already in this hole, right, that they found themselves in, or they dug themselves in unconsciously, how do they then start? They'll start at least feeling back the hole.
First, stop digging.
Stop digging.
Yes. And once you've stopped digging, then start looking for material. Because don't forget, you don't have to get out of the hole directly. I'm assuming the hole is not that big. So you can dig out from the sides and drop it to the bottom and compact it. So you slowly get yourself out of the hole you dug yourself into. Yes. But our problem is we want someone else to bring us the soil so we can put it in the hole we've dug and then try and get out. Now, the energy you use to get into that hole is the energy you shall require to get out. Yes.
Now explain it in real terms.
For example, I'll use our example. We looked at how much we were paying for fees in relation to what we were getting from it. And we realized we were only having our children in a certain school because we were trying to meet certain societal expectations. Your job positions and what dictate that your child should go to. And society goes to the extent of literally even prescribing which schools qualify. But we asked ourselves then, what happens if one of us loses their income? can we really sustain what we are trying to set up for these children? And these kids are with us for the next 18, 20 years. So you need to have long-term expectations and decision-making. So we moved them to a less expensive school, which had, shockingly, a higher quality of education. Because now we did not go looking for a school based on what society told us we should look for. We went looking for a school based on what they would be able to deliver to our children. Secondly, what else did we realize? We realized we were abdicating extracurricular activities to the school. Now, since it's not a core school activity, the school was charging us an arm and a leg. When we took up those extracurricular activities and then coordinated them ourselves, the costs dropped drastically. If my kids wanted to play soccer, I could always find a pitch where they could go and play soccer with others. If my kids wanted to play a musical instrument, I got a musical teacher to come home. I bought an instrument. And the cost was 1/10 of what I was being charged when they were doing it as part of the school. Because to the school, it's not their core business. So we took them to a school that concentrates on its core business, education. 8:15 to 4 o'clock. They then send us back our children to deal with. Yes. Many of us want the school to do everything, plus parent, plus give them new experiences and everything else. So the school says, fine, you're making me run 5 different businesses, so I'll charge you accordingly. I think that's where we need to become, again, intentional. Why are your children in a school where they are? Next was where we lived. Simply it was costing us almost half the equivalent of school fees to have the kids picked and dropped by a school bus. So we relocated so that we're within walking distance of the school. You see, all this takes a certain effort. And that's the effort I'm talking about people don't want to take. Some of them require couples to sit down and have the tough conversation because it's social pressure. The husband might be fine with it, mainly because his barmates don't even know where his kids go to school. They meet in the bar and they part ways in the bar. On the other end, there could be the wife whose entire life revolves around a certain social circle. So for her, that change could be traumatizing. So that means that then you're stuck. You're stuck at the bottom of that pyramid, and then you keep blaming everyone but yourselves. You want to blame your employer, you want to blame the economy, you want to blame the president, but they refuse to blame one person who is totally responsible and has total control, yourself. So that's where the journey starts. Yeah.
I have to put the president back into that. Into that blame.
Fine.
Because by a stroke of a pen, the income of most people went down. Full-time employed, the formal employed.
Okay.
Yeah.
But who brought him the document?
Cabinet proposed, Parliament approved.
Okay. And who sits in Parliament?
Representatives of the people.
So why are you blaming the one guy?
Because it started from Parliament. It started from Cabinet.
I thought it's about mob justice.
It's too far. We cannot reach him.
No. You see, he has to show up to open Parliament. So he has to appease the masses.
But that's the thing. Like that's the other thing that we also need to. I knew I was digging myself into a hole when I brought that up. But here's the thing. I remember. I think it was Osoro, Mr. Osoro, who I think is an MP aligned with UDA.
Yes.
Who actually said the tactics they used to make sure that bill passed.
Yes.
Okay. And we spoke about this in our first episode, where we spoke about when you're talking about the MCAs, the only person we need to elect is the MCA.
Yes.
Because we know where we can find the MCA. I'll tell you, how often have you ever seen your MP coming back after the election?
Do I even know my MP?
Exactly.
But I know my MCA.
But you know your MCA.
Yes.
But.
And he knows me.
But Where do the laws made? Where are those laws made?
The laws are made in Parliament, yes.
Exactly.
And which is why, so that means that
Your theory.
my theory is valid.
It is.
Okay, so we need to work towards that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we only elect our MCAs and we leave them to sort out the other issues.
Yeah, because I mean, MPs,
And then as we sort them out.
the outcry was huge.
But tell me.
And I mean, you'll argue that the outcry was just on Twitter. But people, the changes that we've had, they've had significant impact.
If it's on the payroll, it's 8% of the working population. So it's a niche issue.
But you see, when you look at it like that, the 8% who are employed, they also have they also employ other people.
Yes. So they need to have those people pay their taxes.
If that income is affected,
yes,
then it can become a slippery case.
So that means that they need to either put their money in funding the right person to go to Parliament. I wish you look at the requirements for independence initially, which was, I think Kenya was supposed to have gotten independent in 58 or 59. And one of the conditions before Lancaster was that for you to vote, you must have a certain level of education and you must be tax compliant.
You must have skin in the game.
Yes. And I think we should have, I think that is where we went wrong.
But then doesn't that then disenfranchise a huge population?
No, they're still disenfranchised even now.
Because around that time,
yes,
a huge population was not educated, was not literate.
Yes.
So which means you wanted to give the country to a few folks.
Isn't that what we've still done? At one point, we had a requirement that for you to become a member of Parliament, you had to have a degree. But yet only 5 to 6% of the population has. Weren't we just doing exactly the same thing?
Around that time, I think because why would you be in Parliament if you are unable to read and write? How will you interpret
the question becomes is that what is the purpose of Parliament?
And pass laws, make laws.
And if the law is going to be applied to the least knowledgeable, it must be presented in a way that that person can understand. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that I agree. I think our constitution, the law, even the bills are complex to read.
Yes, we had a member of Parliament who said he had not seen the bill, yet had been tabled a week before.
Yeah.
Yes. And yet he's still holding his seat, even though the same constitution tells us how to get rid of him.
Coach, let's go back to finance. It's interesting how when you're having this conversation, we always go through different bushes and forests.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
So, sort out the expenses, figure out, and you've given us a very good example of evaluating, where you live, the cost of living there, the cost of education. Because I think fees are ridiculously high in this country.
Well, intentionally,
which is. And that cuts across CBC or British curriculum, which is very weird. So we are stuck with.
Sorry to say, for a while I lived in South Sea. 90% of the schools in South Sea offer the international curriculum. And they're actually cheaper than most of the other schools. You see, the question again is about what are you paying for? See, there's a community that understands what we are paying for is education and nothing else.
Not the status.
Not the status. And that's what most of us are paying for. Yeah. And yet, at no time do you bring it up after a certain level of education. No one asks you where you went to primary school. Nobody asks you where you went to kindergarten. Yeah.
Nobody even cares where you went to university at some point.
Yes, at some point, really. And that's what you're supposed to get to.
Yeah.
Is that you collected the knowledge and skills. The question I want to know is, did you apply it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort out the expenses. Now, we are fixing the instability point.
Yes.
At this point, you're trying to say the income you're getting should try to balance your expenses.
It's not a balance.
Or slightly higher. The income.
It's the other end of the scale. Yes.
So
really, your income must always be able to hold you up. Literally think of a seesaw. Yes. If your expenses are heavier than your income, then you're in trouble. Yeah.
So make that conscious decision. Cut down your expenses. If it means losing a few friends, go ahead.
They were never friends in the first place. They were social baggage. Yeah. So drop social baggage. Yes.
Okay. So how do we move to the next layer of independence? Oh, and mind you, we also have, I think there was a layer of where folks don't have an income, but we know they'll always have an expense. What I mean by that is, they don't have a job. Whatever they get is hand to mouth.
No. How do they get the hand to mouth? I'm just trying to make sure you're consistent.
Yes, I am consistent.
If I have no income, then I cannot live hand to mouth.
No. They'll get like the logistics of Kenya, where they just make enough for that particular day. They don't know if they're going to get tomorrow. It's like I don't know if you've seen this, but you'll go to like if you go to industrial area, where when the owner opens the gate and just calls someone at random. That day you have a job. Tomorrow we are not certain about it. And these are cases that we have in this country. So we are not going to be blind to them.
You ask yourself, I worked for in an industrial area, but I was not one of the one being called. At times I was the one calling. And there are times I would actually ask somebody, really, how exactly are you surviving? And they'll tell you, all I need is if I can get 3 weeks of work in a month, I'm fine. Yeah. But what have they done? So they have based their expenses on 3 weeks of work. Yes. So automatically that person you're referring to is actually not at that bottom of that pyramid. The likely person who is at the bottom of that pyramid is the one with a so-called permanent job. And I think the World Bank or the ILO even termed them. They're called the working poor. You would have made more money as a casual than you're making as a permanent employee. The only thing you're sacrificing is the stability of the income. But if you know very well that you're responsible for hustling to make your income, you'll never go hungry. Yes. So let's be very careful about some of these beliefs about certain people. Yeah. I remember once trying to talk to somebody in the factory floor and asking him, why doesn't he want to be moved to management? And he told me because where he is, he's unionizable, and therefore he gets certain perks. He must be given tea twice a day with bread. He must be given 30 days leave. Literally the terms for a unionized person, I had to die for. So he told me, I would rather be fired than be promoted. Yes. And certain people in the union were actually earning more take home than some who were not in the union. So a lot of systems were put in over the years about this urban living thing. It's just that we keep hearing sweeping statements about who is suffering and who is not. And yet we've not spoken to the one we are told is suffering. If they were, they would not be waking up every morning to walk across to industrial area. They would have packed up. Most of them are 5 acres, 2 acres, 10 acres in the village. They can earn a living. Yes. They can feed themselves if that was the objective.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Which begs the question, if they have 15 acres, 5 acres back in the village, why aim for the unpredictability?
It's the story, and I remember a poem. It's a poem about London, and the streets were paved in gold, and the trees were full of fruit and something. So it's not new to Africa. It's the industrialization narrative. Yes. I must make it seem more prestigious to work with insecurities than to be comfortable on your land.
Does this instability have an advantage in how we live? Can you see any?
What it does is it keeps you on toes. I think it keeps you thinking. So in a way, it has it's positive. And I believe there's also a study about that people who live in urban areas tend to have a higher IQ. Yeah. More, I think, because of what you're engaging with, who you're engaging with. So it allows you more mental stimulation. Yes.
There's this Kenyan artist. He's called King Kaka. There's one of the song where he says something along the lines, mjini ni akili, mashambani ndio unahitaji nguvu, something along those lines. I don't have the correct wordings. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it makes sense. Yeah, when you're out there, you have to dig and apply physical energy to make it. In the city, you just need to think. Yeah.
So, how can the people you called the working poor take advantage of this dynamic that we have, whereby you have? I want to believe they also have some acres back in the village. How can we then take advantage of that as an aim of moving from not working poor to just working?
I think more of it would be just about awareness.
Okay.
Yes. The other danger of an urban area or the city is you're always moving at high speed. You rarely have time to stop and think. And think differently, let's say, and be intentional about it. And that's part of the issue why we're saying maybe why employment was supposed to be 8 to 5, and at 5 you leave. And you don't go off to do your side hustle. And you don't go off to drink yourself blind. And you don't go off to dance in a church until you're hoarse. It's time for you to go and think. And if you have 5 acres in the village and you have a relative sitting who is back there, or why not have them cultivate what you need? And then you pay them close to what you're paying in the urban area. So that way then we keep one more person away. And then that land becomes productive. Because you can drive through very many parts of this country and land is fallow. Yet at the other end, people are suffering. But I can see there are people who are already thinking that way. I normally, while I'm walking down in the city, in certain parts, in the lower part of the city, is you get to know what's really happening. And if you go to some of the upcountry bus terminuses, you'll find deliveries coming in of many sacks with names on them from all corners of either bringing in maize or beans or greens. So already the rural area is now starting to feed the urban poor, like we're saying. And I think there's a report last week in the papers about how people in the rural areas are actually making more money than people in the urban areas.
Oh, that's quite interesting.
Which is supposed to really be the case.
Yeah. Because the expenses are fewer.
They're living on their own. You see, they are living the American dream.
Yeah.
They own their house. And and I think who called it that was the Greeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Republican, the citizen. The citizen was one who could produce his own wine, his own grain, and had a place to stay, and his dairy. That was who a citizen was. Yeah.
Okay. That is interesting. But yeah, you're right. I think the village, because you grow your own food, like in some very blessed areas in our country,
yes,
rainfall is always like consistently throughout the year. If it's not, there's a river down there. There is there is a rock that is crying. Drink water you can drink.
Which part of this country is not blessed?
No, the entire country is blessed. I don't want to name names.
No, actually, there's nowhere which is not. Again,
if the water is not coming from up, it can come from down.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's either a river flowing across.
Yeah. Or underground.
So we have, there's a joke that goes around that after independence, the Israelis came and saw President Kenyatta and asked him to point them in a direction of a place which is arid so that they can help to turn it green. So they were taken around the country and then they came back and they told him, we found no barren land.
They didn't go to...
They went. Don't forget, Garissa is now the largest supplier of watermelons to Nairobi. Eh? But a couple of years ago, we called it an arid area.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, our terminology needs to be Kenyanized.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go back to our pyramid. So now, with the 5-acre, we are cutting down expenses. Now you no longer need to go to the supermarket to buy flour. You no longer need to go to the market to buy your greens, your beans, because they come from your 5-acre land.
Yes.
And because you're paying your relative back at home, it will not be a substantial figure. It will be definitely lower than what you spend to buy flour from the...
Yeah, because you're providing housing and food.
Yeah. even if you're to put them on a pay, I want to be...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's pay plus board and
housing and boarding.
And boarding, yes.
Then, of course, the other thing that I'll add, which I've seen also work with me, is you level up a bit your skills. You add a few skills, then that means you can take up more responsibilities. You can provide value elsewhere to people who find your skills to be valuable and they don't have it. They need the service done. So those are things that you can do to increase your income while maintaining your expenses. So one, we said you maintain your expenses, then learn a few skills, do something, increase your value and all that. So those are things you can do. Now we are at this stability
level.
Now I want us to move up to independence. How do we get there? Because I think like that is where everyone wants to get to. At least.
We all can't, but yes, people keep saying that that's what they want to do. Your next level really is, how do you put that money to work for you? So definitely not all of us who have land in the village will turn it productive.
True.
So for the ones who don't want to, then that means if you can increase production in your village land beyond the consumption of those in the village and your family, then you have surplus. And once you have surplus, you can now dispose of that surplus. You can either bring it to Nairobi or it can be disposed of out there in the rural areas. Yes. So then now you're moving to now increase your income without it requiring you to exert yourself. As opposed to a side hustle.
Yeah. Of course.
That to me is not a side hustle.
I understand.
Yes.
I understand. I mean, makes total sense. If something does not require you to, then that's the dream, isn't it?
Yes. And then like you're saying, that means that if you're then controlling your expenses, you're investing, you're making an additional income. So now, like you say, yes, you've increased your income. But then it also means you're less likely to get shocked in the event of losing the earned income. And also what it means, and more critically, is you're likely to either take certain risks at work or take certain challenges at work. You're able to be objective when giving feedback, even to your boss, because you're not tied fully to your paycheck. Yes. The problem now is many of us are tied to the paycheck. So even if your boss shows up with a half-brained idea, you're not taking the chance of telling them it was a half-brained idea. But unfortunately, over time, if you keeping quiet, he will kill the entire business and you'll still end up jobless.
Okay. Wow. So you become, so there is a level of comfort, there's a level of I don't know, confidence that comes with knowing your life is sort of okay.
Yes. And I have examples of it. I have somebody who did that with his life. And literally, he just kept getting promoted. And at one point, the company wanted to give early retirement. He raised his hand first. He said, hey, let me go. He said, anyone else but you. And you see, and that's why I say that even to the employer, they need to go out of their way to help their employees find ways to increase their income in a passive manner. That it shall not affect their work, but will increase their income. Because then what you have is a better employee. Yeah. Unfortunately, you'll usually find a boss who is too scared. Like the one who walks to my friend and asks her, why haven't you upgraded your vehicle? Yeah. Why? Because that means that we know your salary has gone up 100%. You've not increased your expenses, which means that entire increment that you have got in pay is most likely going somewhere to be invested, which means in a very short time,
you will not need us.
You will not need us. And the fear now is also of the boss that if my juniors don't need the job, then who do I manage? Instead of him looking at it as if those beneath me are comfortable and confident, the better they perform and the better I look. So there's a whole paradigm shift with these issues. Yes.
Yeah, that is. But then now we have a situation where employers would prefer you to always living hand to mouth. I think we once spoke about this thing when we were talking about the cycle of money. So you're paid, and then immediately you see an advert of something you need to spend. So capital technically flows from back to where it came from.
Yes, and you have free will. You can be part of the cycle, or you can break away.
Is there such a thing like free will? Isn't that
No, you have free will. I'll tell you, you have free will. You have free will to move house. You have free will to incur new expense. You have free will to move to a new bar. You have free will.
Let's what is this free will? I feel like it's a term being thrown around, but without clear.
Okay, back to my friend. She received a pay rise as well as her other peers. All of them were free to decide whether to buy a new vehicle or not. And they made the choices. She made hers. And that is why when she asked the boss, is this part of my performance review? It's not, which meant she did have free will. If he told her yes, then she does not have free will. Yeah.
So there is, but it appears that we don't take advantage of this thing we call free will.
It takes energy. It's a decision. You need to power on your brain for the decision. We don't want to turn it on. We are comfortable leaving it at a dim level.
It's painful. It's painful swimming upstream, you know.
Yes. But yet the trout does it. And the salmon.
They need to go ahead. You know, it's quite funny. I was watching this documentary on, that
the salmon moving upstream. Yes,
and it's quite fascinating how nature works. Because then, that time when they need to swim upstream is actually towards winter.
Yes,
and that means that the bears need to position themselves strategically so they can be able to eat as many salmons
as they can. Yes,
as they prepare for
hibernation.
That's quite. It's quite. I think when you observe nature,
Which is why I say all these things of humans thinking that they're having an impact on the earth is what we call kiburi. Yes, it's a sense of arrogance. Mother Nature has frozen this planet multiple times and she'll do it again when it's time. It's just not yet time. We can pollute what we want and think we're adding value and start driving electric cars. But when Mother Nature decides it's time for the salmon to swim upstream, the salmon will swim upstream.
But what happens when we have the ice melting away?
It's happened before. Why are we concerned? It'll take hundreds of years, thousands of years, millions of years.
What do you mean? Why are we not concerned?
Why are you concerned? Let me
You're
tell
seeing
you.
weather changes, weather patterns change.
Where? We have no record.
Even in Nairobi.
We have no record. Show me a record. We keep talking about this. I don't know, the rains have changed. And you ask somebody, show me a record. No one has one. Oh, the meteorological department has one. Who told you they do?
Don't they?
I don't think they do.
I mean, they've been taking...
At least we used to have it when I was in primary school.
Yes,
because we used to have a chart. And we used to have a small weather station.
I was joking with someone the other day, and now that you mentioned this, it's actually not a joke anymore. About nowadays, none of our news station actually provides us weather news.
Yeah.
I
suspect meteorological department started charging.
I stopped. I don't know if KBC still does it, but the media houses, that none of them.
We want traffic news. We don't want weather forecasts.
But that is quite interesting, because I'll tell you, when I was growing up, that is how I knew other cities.
Yes.
When they were talking about Khartoum will be having, Joburg will be having. That is how I knew. That is how I was learning. that was my geography.
Good.
And it was quite fascinating that, when I was driving back and you leave one area, it's raining, then it's like you're driving into the rain. Do you know how fascinating that is?
For the urban boy. I think what we've lost out on is we never questioned why certain things were being done. We assumed that they were for lack of something better. So when we opened up multiple channels to send around gossip, we forgot that part of what they're supposed to do is educate and enlighten. They don't. I don't know if it's with you. I spoke to you about the increasing of the intelligence of the British people.
Briefly, but yeah.
Yes, and how they put dartboards into bars, and that helped to increase the intelligence of the people.
Oh, that's quite interesting.
Then they put in pool tables and billiards tables and snooker. And that really is how you improve the intelligence of your people. Very
Focus.
passively.
Yeah.
That's it. So if you go into a bar and what you have is a DJ and not a dartboard, then you know that is an environment where intelligence is diminishing rapidly.
But that is...
What?
That is common.
Yes, and which is why the intelligence is diminishing rapidly.
It's quite fascinating how you constantly reference the British as a population or a government that was intentional on their people, what they are consuming. Because I think and we were talking about, they privatize almost everything other than BBC.
Yes.
It's quite interesting.
Oh,
why reference? What's fascinating about the British and what they're doing?
Small little island conquers Europe, conquers the world, then pretends to shrink back to the island, yet still controlling the world. That's brilliance. There's a new report that came out last week. It was an NPR yesterday and this morning that of the 10 top media houses in America are currently headed by a Briton.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
So there's a story of the one who is currently at the Washington Post, who fired a reporter and told them, I don't see what you're doing here. The statistics clearly show that no one is reading your articles. So why do we need to keep you? And somebody says, no American would have done that. And so the question is, are the British then better? They still are. And that's why you need to remember, America was a colony of the US, of the UK. Kenya was. And so we need to ask ourselves, how did they do it? So there's a level of brilliance in them. And why I also reference them is, I listened to, I think it was a sweeper or something being asked about Brexit. And he could articulate why they had to break away. And I was thinking, seriously? This guy is sweeping the street and he understands the logic about Brexit? Try that in Kenya. Actually, in Kenya, get even onto the golf course. Chances are somebody will give you statements based on a meme. So we need to ask ourselves, how is it that the British still rule us without being here?
Someone listen to that and say, and respond and say, they had superior weapons. They had.
No. They had superior intellect. It's not about your weapons.
But where did they use, other than Australia? Because, the British never used, what's the style?
Force.
They used force.
No.
What do you mean no?
They never used force.
Here, how did they? Because if you look at, even when they went to the Americas, they started off with the religion. And when what was the name of that community, the king refused, then now they came back blazing.
Remember that it was Europeans who went into the Americas. There's a reason why half of Canada speaks French.
Yeah.
Most of the ones who went in violently were the Spaniards.
Yeah.
But you raise a very interesting question. Most of what happened when the Europeans landed in the Americas and in Africa was they brought plagues. Yes.
Yeah.
And that is why we feared them. Because wherever they passed, people died from all the illnesses that they had carried, which for them what's the word? They're not immune, they were carriers.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what wiped out many African populations.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's very little need to apply force. Fear was already instilled in people over this, one, different color. Yes. Two, causes death to people without touching them. Before that, we only died from stab wounds and being eaten by hyenas. Yes.
Our bodies had. But then over time, our bodies have also learned to.
But it's taking time.
Yeah. But then what happens? It's the same way. When they came here, things like mosquitoes did a good at them, or took a toll of them.
Part of them, but let's look at it. But part of why they were able to take over most territories had nothing to do with superior weaponry.
But this is what I'm
Unless you're saying genocide, germ warfare qualifies.
Here's what I'm saying.
Yes.
First of all, the scramble of Africa, if you're talking about Africa,
yes,
was discussed. For me, what's fascinating is that around this time, these folks were able to actually map out the entire Africa. That is intellect.
Yes.
I give it. Right? But the fact that they had to strategize, we're talking about Africans who had no clue or were not even thinking about, the coming of, we do have historical, where we're being told that there were prophets. Like in our case, we had, was it Sakawa, who who prophesied.
We had many. We had the Maasai one.
Yeah, we had
Oleboy and Lenana and Patia.
Who were prophesying
Yes.
the coming of
The train and the white man.
Yes.
Yes.
But ultimately, if someone had a strategy, and we need to agree with this, if someone has a plan, a strategy of how they're going to invade. I mean, I was reading an article the other day that was saying that part of Mombasa was supposed to be taken up to Zanzibar.
Yeah, because it belonged to the Sultan of Oman.
Sultan of Oman.
Yes.
But what was the conversation between how did it end up how did it end up to be separate from the rest of the country? If it wasn't, because the Germans were the first people to want to take over Kenya.
Yes.
Right? And I think I can't remember the facts, but it had something to do with the debt that they needed to pay the British. So now the British were like, okay, take over this country. Just listen to that conversation. Take over this land. Like no one was there. That was clear strategy, strategized clearly.
But not military. Still intellect.
It was intellect, but then you need military at the end of the day.
No. Most of it, you look at it, they signed treaties. They were given land.
By whom?
By most communities. The Kikuyus gave land. There are photos of paramount chiefs signing off. Land from wherever all the way to Murang'a. And remember, we were not colonized by the British government. We were colonized by a corporation.
Yes.
Yes. This was business.
It was quite interesting.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting how, because that December 12th, there's a significance.
And we don't get it.
Yeah, we were taken over by a corporation.
Yes, and the corporation is still here.
What was the name of the corporation?
The
Bell or something.
Something East Africa Corporation.
You took the easiest way out.
Because the other was East India. It was East India Corporation. The other took over India.
There's I think it's BI or something. There's BIEA. Something along those lines.
Okay. We'll Google it at some point.
Okay. So now we are at this comfort level. We are at this. I don't think that is the ultimate. That is not the freedom yet. At this point, you're comfortable, but you're not at the freedom level yet. Would you agree?
Which what you mean is that you still need to work to cover part of your expenses. Yes.
So how do you move to the?
It's simply that. Just increase your passive income so that it's equal to or greater than your expenses.
I think when you say it, it's like you know when I remember when I was being taught mole concept in chemistry.
Yes.
And this just doing it. It's very easy. Because you're doing it all together. It's a collective.
Yes.
Okay? Actually, it wasn't the mole. There's the flowcharts. There's the organic chemistry.
Yes.
Or these mixes with these, you get these. This reacts with these, you get these. And when the flowchart, it's very easy. It's magical. It's like, so you move from here. Oh, there is a chamber here, and then the chamber gives you this. So it's very magical. It flows
until the exam
comes, and now you are on your own. Give me a scenario for an exam.
Okay, I can only use my example.
Fair enough.
Okay. Again, it's about the decisions you make. So fine. Move the kids to a less expensive school, but of higher academic excellence. Okay. Which for most people will think it's an oxymoron. But it's not. If you get somebody who's a specialist in something and let them only do what they're a specialist in, they will do it very well. Okay. Secondly is where you live. Part of where you live, there's a decision in this part of the world to ask yourself, do you need to buy or rent? So last week, somebody pops up out of the US and he tells me, you remain poor paying rent. I will take a mortgage. And I realized the indoctrination is not only with us. It's global. The man fully believed in what he was saying. that the best way to move out of poverty is to have a mortgage. And yet I ask myself, 80% of Kenyans live on their own land and they have no mortgage. But because they have no mortgage, they are termed as
Poor.
Do you see how confusing this thing can be? So the decision came as a family. Me and my wife sat down and asked, should we buy a house or should we rent? And then the question comes up. If we rent, what do we do with the difference? Now, to many, they will rent, and the difference between, mainly why we looked at renting is the house, and I would like to say thank you very much to all those landlords who housed us over 26 years. Yes, you did us a great service. So when we looked at it is, at that time, I think we were living in Imara Daima. Rent was 20,000 shillings. If we were to buy that house, it would have cost us 3.5 million. Now, at 3.5 million, our mortgage would have been 45,000. Yet, renting the same house was costing us 20. So, which means there was a difference of 25,000. So we had a surplus of 25,000 shillings. So the question became, what do we do with the 25,000? And that's why I say it's at the point of consumption that you decide whether you want to remain at the bottom of that pyramid of yours or you want to move up. Now, to move up was take the 25,000 shillings and put it away. Assume, since you have the capacity to pay 45 and you're paying 20, the difference you save. So we saved that for a while, and then we said, okay, fine, we've got money on the side. What do we do with it? Do we just keep growing it? Those were not the good new days where the government is giving you 15% interest. Otherwise, that would have been a no-brainer. We would have just given the government the money for 15 years and enjoy our return. So we decided, where do we invest this that we can then get a passive income? So went around looking for real estate. And fortunately enough, was able to get a property that was able to pay us net of expenses about 35,000 shillings, which therefore meant we had now subsidized our rent.
Yeah.
So our tenants, so we had 8 tenants or something, about 8 tenants. So the 8 tenants were able to pay to subsidize our rent. But we didn't subsidize it, we kept putting the money away, which then helped us to get a second property, a third property, a fourth property. It's only now, 26, 27 years later, that we can now see the impacts of those decisions. A lot of our peers bought houses. So what they now have is they have equity in a property, which they can only extract by selling, and they have no cash flow. So my journey, to me, I've said I have made certain intentional decisions, and the outcome hasn't been too bad. Yes. So it's not that it's not possible to do it, but again, you must constantly keep conscious of what you're doing, what decisions you're making as you're moving forward. So have I got you out from the bottom?
No. I think your process is quite clear, and thank you for sharing using your example.
Welcome.
So I think what you've alluded to most is intentionality, and your argument is that is one thing that we really, really lack as a population. Is we enjoy the flow.
We are comfortable with the flow.
Yes. So the question is, how do you break that out? And that is the question that each one of us has to answer for themselves.
Yes. It's not a group activity. Yes. If you're looking for it as a group activity, pole.
Thanks, Coach.
Welcome.
So as we finalize, talk about your cash flow sessions. You said you've run some trainings. Now you do them 6 months. Why
Yeah.
6 months?
It's going to be longer now. What I realized when I ran them last year and earlier this year more frequently was the lessons learned are quite heavy. And throwing people into the deep end might not be a very good idea. So I think until I can find a way to tone down the impact of the learnings, I'll hold off. Yeah, because I think I stopped expecting a large conversion, but after training almost 1,500 people and getting like 10 who changed their lives, then I realized, yes, it was a much greater journey than I initially imagined. Yes.
So for someone who's willing to start swimming in the deep end right now, where can they start?
Well, if they can get a chance to play the game with the right environment, then I think that's the best place. If you like to take the bull by the horns and deal with its thrashes and its possibility of its goring you, it's 6 to 8 hours of pure pain. Yes.
It's painful.
Yes.
It is a painful affair.
You should know.
Someone who was listening to this and they feel like, okay, maybe I need to do my net worth and assess my finances as a beginning point. Where can they? You mentioned a link. Where can they find it? Or we'll put the link in the
notes, in the show notes. Then let's see how many people click it. Like I say, everybody wants to become financially independent, but very few people will do what it takes to become. If there was appeal, somebody would become very rich.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Dixon.